Hey, everybody joining. Welcome to today's webinar, Funding Circle, Navigating Career Progression in Engineering and Technology as a Woman. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes so that people can join. So we'll begin in just a couple of minutes. Hello to everyone, everyone joining in. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes just to give a chance for more people to join, but welcome, and we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Okay, let's get started. I think it's so great to see so many of you joining. I'm sure more people will still be here to join, but let's get started for the moment. So hello everybody, and welcome to today's session. My name is Sarah Hunter. I'm an talent acquisition manager at HackerJob. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with HackerJob, but just in case you aren't, HackerJob is an AI-assisted hiring platform that matches great tech talent with roles that truly suit their requirements and skills. Today, I'm going to be the moderator of this event, so welcome to Funding Circle, Navigating Career Progression in Engineering and Technology as a Woman. During this event, we'll be discussing tips for progressing from an engineering role into management, switching to a tech career, as well as Funding Circle's internal work on their latest pricing API. As part of this event, you will have the opportunity to take part in an exclusive Q&A session and speak directly to the team at Funding Circle. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentations, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the session, and we'll also have time for more questions at the end. So do keep them coming into the Q&A box. I'll just start off by introducing today's presenters, all wonderful engineers from Funding Circle. So we have Angeline Moulet-Marquis, who's an engineering manager. We have Shireen Missy, who is a senior software engineer. And we have Victoria Jusko, Ella Bastian, and Sarah O'Grady, all software engineers at Funding Circle. I think we're going to start off with a presentation from Angeline, if you would like to take it away.
Yeah, let's do it. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here talking about the change from engineering to engineering manager today. So yeah, let's get started. Next slide, please. So just a bit of introduction from me. I'm Angeline. I've been in tech for about 16 years, but I'm going to stop counting at some point. I've been in a few different industries, banking industry, betting industry, more recently, fintech industries. The first 15 years of my career were software engineer with, at different point in time, responsibilities of tech lead, team lead, chapter lead, things like that. The past 1.5 years, I've been an engineering manager at Funding Circle. I've worked both in France, which is my home country, and I've been in the UK for about 9 years. Outside of software engineering, I really love baking. I love musical theater, and I love anything about being in the mountains, especially winter sports. The picture is of me going down a fairly steep ridge in the French Alps. Well, about to go down this ridge. Yeah, next slide, please. So I want to talk about the progression from engineering to engineering manager, sorry. And the first part of what I want to talk about is just that path, presenting that path to engineering manager. It requires quite a good balance of tech skills, and people skills, or soft skills, depending on how you call them. I've often heard before becoming an engineering manager that it doesn't take the most technical person in the room to be a manager, but or to be a good one at least, but it does require some strong basis. Like you have to be able to understand tech to be a good manager, and you also definitely have to be able to understand people very well. Another thing that's good to understand is that the role can mean different things at different companies. Some companies, especially early in the manager path, have fairly hands-on roles where managers still code, still contribute to the technology at the company. And on some other companies, from the beginning, you are very hands-off. You have low to no time to code, and you are just stepped away, or like one step away from the hands-on tech, let's say. So understanding that and understanding what the role means at your company or the company you want to apply to is very important. Another thing I've often heard, and I can confirm is true, is that progression should be seen as a move sideways rather than up. Like it's not a like promotion that you get and it's a one-way ladder where you go towards that promotion to manager. It's nearly a change in careers. At most companies, there's kind of that time where you have a fork in the road where either you continue progressing in the tech branch or you choose to do that move sideways towards engineer manager role. And it's important to understand that. That says no two careers look the same. It doesn't have to be a linear move up or sideways. Like more and more people have kind of like a squiggly careers where you try different roles, you go back and forth between industries, role, careers. So yeah, it's also important to notice that. Next slide, please. The second theme I want to cover is how to prepare to be an engineering manager. So if you know, or if you think that engineering manager might be a role for you, even if you think it's years down the road, it's important to, like there's things you can do to get ready now, even if it's years down the road. The first one, if there was just one thing to remember, is talk to your manager about it. Like your manager being aware that it's something you're looking to, even if it's years down the road, is super important because they can make sure to help you discover if it's really what you want to do, have chances to try a few different things as a software engineer that can confirm or get you ready for this role. Talk to other managers as well. Of course, your manager is the most, like is a well-placed person to help you, but other managers as well, either in your company or in networking events, online, through talks, is really helpful. They can give you how it was for them to, how the path to engineer manager was for them and help you prepare as well. And it's also important to understand that it doesn't have to be binary. Like if you're a software engineer, you have no leading capacity. And if you're an engineering manager, you are the leader you have leading capacity. It's not binary. There's lots of ways to show leadership as a software engineer. And those opportunities are good examples of how to get ready or confirm it's something you want to do. Being a tech lead, being a project lead, working on cross-team initiatives, onboarding people to your team, all of those small leadership things are a very good way to both get ready for the role or just confirm it's something you want to do. And if you think you're going in that direction, even years before, it's important to start defining what you want that role to be later on, because it will help you get ready and understand what it means for you. Next slide, please. And my last topic today would be handling the transition. So now it's not years down the road anymore. It's there. You have the opportunities. You're about to start your first role as an engineering manager. There's things you can do to handle this transition well. The first one is to be mindful about the change in the feedback loop. So here I'm not talking about feedback as in giving or receiving feedback to your teammates. I'm talking about the loop between you doing something as a manager and looping it back to the value it brings. As a software engineer, I found it easier to realize the value I bring because the loop between writing a line of code and it being in production or bringing value to the company or the customer is usually short. It goes pretty fast. So it's easier to realize what you bring to the table. As an engineering manager, something you do today, helping your team through a project, helping an engineer grow in their career, something you do today might only bring value in weeks, months, sometimes even more than that. So it's important to understand that and be prepared. And in the same kind of topic, start writing your achievement. It's something that I often give as an advice, not only to engineering managers, but in this case, it's really important. Start writing what you do, start writing what you help your team through, anything you do as an engineering manager during that first week, not only during the beginning, but in the beginning, it's even more important. It helps you realize what you do bring, what value you do bring, because like I said, this loop is a bit longer. And also it helps answering back to that imposter syndrome that most people have to a certain level. It's important to set goals for this transition, whether you have some sort of trial period, secondment period, or probation in a new job or not. It's important to have some sort of goals, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, to have as milestones to your transition. It would be easy to just jump in the role and do what needs to be done, but it's good to step back and reflect on what you want this transition to be. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to learn in this transition? Finding support in other managers is really helpful. A bit like I said in the other slide, reaching out to the other managers in your team, not only your manager, but also the other managers in your company, the other managers in your networking circle. Ask them how they did handle the transition, what they wish they knew before they began that role. The role is quite a big change. Whether you already had leading roles as a tech lead, as a team lead before, it will be quite a big change. Lots of things are going to come your way, and it's going to be even more crucial than before to learn to say no or to prioritize, to understand where is your time best spent. And the last advice I want to give, but definitely not the least important, is it's a very important time to take care of yourself. The transition is big. Even if it goes well, even if you're super happy with your new role, even if it's mostly positive, even positive change can be overwhelming. So the transition to this new role, or any other new role, to be honest, is a good opportunity to take care of yourself. Self-care, prioritize taking time off when you can. Don't overwork just because there are lots to do. There will always be lots to do, especially during a new role. So it's a great time to take care of this and make sure you don't burn out during this transition. Next slide, please. I don't know if the slides will be shared after, but if you want to take a screenshot, those are two books that I can recommend. I've read The Manager's Path before even being close to becoming a manager, but it's really good at explaining the different paths to the engineering manager role. And The Making of a Manager is also a really good book that I read just as I was beginning the role. So I would recommend both of them as very good books. And I think that's it for me. And I can give the mic to Shireen for her pricing API presentation.
Thank you, Angeline. So hello, everyone. I am Shireen, a senior software engineer at Funding Circle. Today, I'm excited to showcase one of my latest projects, the US Pricing API, through this tech demo. During this demo today, I'll take you through the project's journey from its inception to completion. I'll begin by providing some background on the project's development and followed by a walkthrough of the design and implementation phases. And finally, I will touch up on the testing phase that ensured the project's seamless integration. I hope you'll find this demo both informative and engaging, and thank you for tuning in. So first, let's start with the background of the project. At the beginning, we started with a pricing configuration service for loan products. We have this service already, and it's called the US pricing model. This service was designed to calculate the price of loan application, and based on the risk grade of the borrower and the length of the loan term. Based on these two values, the prices were calculated. So we have the origination fees and the interest rates. This service was built using Python framework Flask. Flask is a lightweight and efficient web framework that allows for developing web applications quickly and with minimal setup. And this service have been around for around 4 years now. The pricing information in this service are all stored in JSON files, which in itself is not a bad thing, but I will talk about the challenges of this approach in a second. An important thing about the pricing model is we need to ensure accuracy and maintain control over pricing changes. And that means any modification to the pricing model must go through a rigorous progress of pull request reviews and deployments. This approach ensures that the pricing changes are thoroughly vetted and tested before being implemented in production. And now let's talk about the challenges with this approach. The first challenge is that having the pricing information tightly coupled with the repository makes it difficult to update without a new deployment. And that means there is an inflexibility in the pricing model, which can hinder innovation and experimentation with the pricing, and can lead to an inability to adapt to changing market conditions. One thing that came up during the discovery of this project is also we found that the communication between the pricing model and other services can be complex and error-prone because the service has been around for a while now and things has changed since it was first introduced. We scoped some refactoring work for the communication between this service and the other services in our system as part of this project. So to solve these challenges, we decided to make a few changes. First thing, we decided to store the pricing information in a database to facilitate more efficient updates and reduce deployment overhead. We also decided to develop an API to manage the pricing information, enabling more streamlined communication between services and more seamless integration with other systems. We also decided to create a user interface to enable stakeholders to easily make changes to pricing information without requiring direct involvement from the engineering team. And finally, we decided to refactor the communication between services to ensure that all consumers of the pricing information can access it via the new pricing API, reducing complexity and potential errors. And during this design phase of the project, we adapted some of the best engineering practices. Firstly, we documented all discussions related to the design decision in pull request on GitHub, ensuring that all stakeholders had visibility into the decision-making process. We also created architectural decision records, ADR, to document key design decisions, rationale, and trade-offs. And the template for this ADR was adapted from the software architecture, the hard parts book. And we also conducted a thorough evaluation of multiple approaches, considering a range of factors such as scalability, performance, maintainability, and cost. And during the whole process, we engaged a diverse team of engineers to ensure that different perspectives were considered and potential issues were identified early in the design process. Now let's talk about the implementation of this project. So as part of the implementation, we developed a new service to host the pricing API, providing a more scalable and flexible architecture for managing the pricing information. And we replaced the previous US pricing model with the new pricing API, streamlining communication between services and reducing dependencies on legacy code. The new pricing API was implemented with Ruby on Rails, leveraging the framework's robust features and extensive community support. Some of the best practices we adopted for developing the pricing API were first, versioning. To maintain backward compatibility, we adapted versioning of the API endpoints. And also we developed a clear and concise documentation for the API, including details on endpoints, parameters, response formats, and error handling, which was critical for users to understand how to interact with the API. For the documentation part, we used OpenAPI, or what used to be called Swagger. And also we implemented a robust input validation and error handling mechanism to ensure that the API is secure and that issues can easily be diagnosed and fixed. For testing, we adapted a comprehensive testing strategies, including unit test, integration test, and end-to-end test, to ensure that the API was functioning as intended to detect and resolve issues early in the development cycle. Finally, we implemented logging and monitoring capabilities to track the API usage and to identify potential issues or areas for improvement in real time. These practices ensured that the system remained stable and that we could quickly respond to issues if and when they arise. And finally, I will be talking about the testing approach for the new pricing system. To ensure that the new pricing system does not break any of the existing functionality, we decided to run the new pricing API side by side with the US pricing model. We compared the results of the old and the new systems and reported any differences, enabling us to identify and address potential issues early on in the testing process. Once both systems had been running without errors for a sufficient period of time, we plan to switch over to using the new pricing API exclusively. This staged approach to testing helped us minimize the risk of disruption to critical business processes and ensure a smooth transition to the new pricing system. And finally, it's important to note that engineering involves more than simply writing code. It's a craft that requires a broad range of skills and knowledge, from project management to problem solving to testing and collaboration. And yeah, so before we move to the QA section, I'd like to express my gratitude to you all for taking the time to join us today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to both of our speakers, Angeline and Shireen. Super interesting presentations there. I think that really gave us a great insight into both how to get to a leadership position as a woman in tech, and also what sorts of projects you could work on as a senior developer, especially at Funding Circle. So yeah, now we want to open the floor to some questions from everybody watching. So please do enter your questions into the Q&A section of the Zoom control panel. Remember, there are no silly questions, and this is a really great opportunity to speak directly to some senior people at Funding Circle. So I would just love to start off with some of the questions that have come through already. So one for Angeline, and maybe Shireen, if you wanted to answer as well. Have you benefited from mentorship during your career at all? And if so, who and how did it help you?
Yeah, I can answer that. I don't think I have benefited for like an official like mentor-mentee relationship, but I definitely got a lot of support in my growth from current and past managers, whether at Funding Circle or before. in my career, earlier in my career. And even from like other senior engineers, the mentorship doesn't have to come from a manager, like just people in your circle, people in your area, understanding what their careers look like. Again, like I said in my presentation, sharing experiences, I really believe is really, really powerful.
Fantastic. Thank you. Shireen, did you have anything to add to that or?
Yeah, I think my experience was similar to Angeline, that I never received a one-on-one mentor-mentee relationship, but I was lucky, especially at the beginning of my career, to have one of my first manager who had like really good experience in software engineering, and he was mentoring me. But also now in Funding Circle, we have a very diverse team of engineers with different experience, and I feel like I learn a lot from everyone on our team.
Fantastic. So yeah, maybe it's putting yourself out there and starting those conversations more than, you know, having a direct mentor. Awesome. We've got a couple of questions from members of the audience who have recently completed boot camps or coding academies. What sort of tips would you give for them in how to find a role quicker?
I mean, I don't have myself the background of coming from a bootcamp, but I've had people in my teams coming from bootcamp, and we have a few of them at Funding Circle for sure. Again, at the risk of repeating myself, I think talking about it, like talking it in your circle, talking about past like alumni of your bootcamps. I'm sure that those bootcamps probably provide groups where you can network with other people who have gone through the same bootcamp, understanding how they find a job before you were in this group. I think could be a good tip.
Excellent. Shireen, did you have any tips as well?
Yeah, I think I didn't come from a boot camp, so I don't have that personal experience, but I think in the industry now there are so many open roles, but I think the challenge for someone who graduates from a boot camp is that they don't have enough coding experience. So I would suggest that they code as much as they can, and they try to like improve their coding skills, and once they have that leveled up, they can find a role easily, I guess.
Absolutely. Learn as much as you can, right? Fantastic. So we have a question here about your opinions maybe on male bias in the industry, and I thought it'd be good to kind of get your thoughts on how organizations or individuals themselves can create that supportive environment for women in the tech industry.
That's an interesting one and a tough one as well. In this topic, I really believe in having role models, like having women female in position of senior engineering, management, even like leadership roles. It's already hard for certain people to project in higher position in the hierarchy, or if in further down in their career. So if there is no one that is like them, a women or whatever diversity we're talking about, if there's no one there that they can relate to, it's even harder. So it makes it a tiny bit easier to relate and think you can make it if there is people like you in those roles. So I think having those roles, at least some of them, you know, filled by women is a good way to encourage it.
Absolutely, definitely a necessary step that we need to take, I think. Shireen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree again with Angeline that having a role model is a very important thing, and I think it's really important for us like senior engineer or people who have been in the industry for a long enough time to support more junior women engineers and give them like some mentorship, and also show them the role model that they can enter the industry and they can make an impact. But also for businesses, I think it's having more women engineers on interviewing boards, in management roles, that is also can help attract more like a woman engineer to join the teams.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, especially at interview, which actually leads us nicely onto another question we had about dealing with an interview as a woman in tech, potentially facing people who, you know, might have certain biases, might have certain thoughts of what a woman can do in the tech industry. Do you have any tips or any thoughts on how to maybe change, you know, make your gender, make your diversity your strength in an interview process?
It's hard. I guess for companies, it's important to have that in their hiring process, or to have at least things in place that lower the risk of it happening, or for a candidate to feel like that in their interview. Like Shireen said, having diverse interview panel already like lowers the risk of a candidate feeling that way a lot. So that's what companies can do. I guess the question was more as a candidate what you can do. I mean, it's hard, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer for this, to be honest. Apart from if it's something that's in this company culture, you probably don't want to work there. That's the only things that come to mind, to be honest, on this one.
And understandable, I think. Be picky with where with the kind of environment that you want to work in, for sure. Shireen, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one, because if the company is biased, it's really hard to get like a fair shot at interviewing there. But I think like just be proactive and maybe ask many questions during the interview and ask for feedback. Like if they are not able to provide a constructive feedback on your interview performance, then it might be just like a biased decision that you don't get a job there.
Absolutely. Always ask for feedback, whether it's this situation or not. I think it's a really good point, because that's the only way we practice and we grow and we learn, right? So yeah, good advice there, I think, from both sides. One for Shireen, actually, around the topics that you spoke about today. So what have you done differently now during the implementation of the pricing API? And also, what are the benefits of architectural decision records?
Yeah, the benefit of architectural decision record is that you document, because you like most of the time we design something, we plan to do it some way, and then we go to the implementation and we forget about the details, like why did we decide to go through like specific path. And I think having that documented can be always like a point, like you can always go back and see why you did that. And also it's important for people who can come after us and look at this system and say like, why did we make this decision we made? Because it's not like about doing the right or the wrong thing. It's mostly about the trade-offs, about like evaluating the current situation, and it depends on on the project and the other, like there are so many factors to like that determines what decisions we make. So I think this is a very good thing that I think it can all like engineering teams, they can benefit from it. And also it's all like from a book that is also like I highly recommend. It's called the Software Architecture, the Hard Parts. I think that I did differently is just like spend more time on design and planning. And I was lucky this project didn't have a strict deadline. So I had the flexibility of taking my time, like planning out, doing few things, and then like, oh, okay, finding out this was not the right thing to do, and then going back to the design and drawing something different. So I think this is really good. Like the more time you spend on designing, the solution is really like it helps with having like minimal error later on once it's implemented. So I think that's really good.
Awesome. It's really interesting to hear insights from, you know, an engineer into why you've done things the way you've done things. So hopefully that was really helpful for that person. Thank you so much to both Angeline and Shireen. I think that was really, really insightful part of this webinar. So thank you again for sharing your thoughts and your advice as well. What we'll do now is move on to our panel with the tech career changes. So we have Victoria Jusko, Ella Bastian, and Sarah O'Grady. If you'd all like to yeah, there we go, we're all ready to go. Fantastic. So I'll just kind of start us off, maybe to kind of introduce yourselves a little bit. If we go through all three of you with where did you start your career and why did you begin? Sarah, if we come to you first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks to Angeline and Shireen as well. That was super interesting for us who are at the company too. So my career journey started off as a Spanish teacher. So I really have done quite a pivot in my career. I became head of Spanish. I did 3 years in a secondary school and decided I wanted a bit of a change. Went into ed tech, first of all, where I discovered, you know, developers were working with developers and decided that actually I preferred that side of things, and made another pivot and did Le Wagon Bootcamp, which was a 9-week bootcamp, and then ended up working for them as a teacher and an engineer for 2 years. And now I am at Funding Circle as an engineer 1.
Fantastic. Definitely a big pivot there. Victoria, if we come to you next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Victoria. I'm an engineer 2 at Funding Circle. I've been at Funding Circle for just over 2 years. I started my journey right at the beginning of pandemic. I was a luxury travel specialist before. And for the past kind of for the last 2 years in my career, I was questioning if that's kind of the top of my potential. And I had a few friends that actually did a bootcamp and were in the industry. So I was itching to do it, but it was quite scary to leave a really comfortable and well-paid employment to start something, you know, that I had no experience in, and you know, kind of just do a leap of faith. But then, luckily and sadly, pandemic happened. And obviously, as you can imagine, travel industry was affected quite heavily. I was furloughed, and you know, that was the perfect timing to do a bootcamp. I was getting paid. I wasn't legally allowed to do anything for my company. So you know, I decided that if not now, when I started researching myself and did a bit of front-end engineering, so CSS and HTML, literally just doing courses online myself. I realized that, you know, the visual confirmation of what you've done is really fun, but it wasn't challenging enough for me. So I tortured everyone I knew that went to a bootcamp or was in the industry to kind of realize and make a conclusion for myself which bootcamp would be best for me. And yeah, then in July, I had my admissions, and then the rest is kind of history. But yeah, that's a little bit on my journey. Ella, would you like to tell us what's your experience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ella. Thanks for coming along. So I'm a software engineer apprentice. I started my apprenticeship last July. So I've been doing it for about 8 months now. The first 3 months consisted of a boot camp, and since October, I've been here at Funding Circle. So I decided that I wanted to become a software developer after working my previous role. So I worked in digital policy for the government. I saw a lot of software projects that were happening, and I was really interested. In terms of how I began, I did a couple of online learning courses to teach myself the basics. And then I wanted to do more. So I came across after doing some research, I came across some free taught group courses online. So I did a course by Code for First Girls, the Introduction to Python course, and that was 4 weeks long, kind of like reinforcing the basics. And then the second course that I did was a longer, more in-depth course by Sky, targeted at women looking to change their careers. So that course culminated with a group project where we had to build a full stack web application. And then soon after that, I applied for my apprenticeship and was successful. And in my interviews for the apprenticeship, I used like the projects I've done from those 2 courses.
Awesome. I think it's super interesting to see all 3 of you coming from kind of different backgrounds, different entries into tech. So yeah, thank you for that. Ella, let's come back to you actually and kind of dig in and maybe a little bit deeper. Like what made you choose the tech industry and ultimately change your career?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my previous job was kind of technology adjacent. So I worked for a digital organization, but on the policy side. I got to speak to a lot of people working in tech, and I saw a lot of interesting projects going on. So like over the pandemic, I saw a lot of teams developing apps to support the response. And I was writing case studies about those things. So I saw the process behind the product and behind the application. And I found that really inspiring. So I started thinking about if it would be possible for me to go and work on the tech side of things. Yeah, I started researching possible roles I could do. And luckily my manager was so supportive. He introduced me to a few people in my company, one of whom was a software engineer, and she ended up becoming a mentor to me and supporting me in my learning. So it really helped having someone to steer me in the right direction.
Fantastic. So yeah, so there's somebody who has had a mentor in the industry, which did really help you. That's great. I just want to remind everybody watching along to keep putting your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will still have time for more questions at the end of this panel. So yeah, Victoria, let's come to you next. What language would you recommend for a beginner to learn?
Yeah, I guess I can only advise subjectively based on my experience, but as I mentioned, I started with front-end development because I didn't really know, where else to start. I understand, I was quite overwhelmed with the amount of resources that you could find online, and it is really hard to decide on what language would be best for you. However, I would say try stuff. I started with HTML, CSS, realized that it's not challenging enough, and then carried on with more of a backend development and started looking at Ruby. That clicked and was a very organic kind of journey for me. During bootcamp, we also started looking at JavaScript. My body completely rejected that experience. I did not like that. It was a lot of punctuation. It didn't click for me. So I would say, yes, trying different things, but also sticking with one thing when you understand that, okay, this kind of works for me. I understand the conventions. It's easy and very readable for me. Try not to jump around. Obviously, there's always a pressure because you don't know what company you will end up with, what language they will be using. But in general, there's a much better, much higher value in you being a specialist in one thing rather than you knowing a lot of things, but really on the surface. So, try out things. Whatever is going to work for you is a really good start, and just try to follow through. That would be my advice. Sorry if it wasn't specific enough, though. Yeah, I guess Sarah might have something completely different to say.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with you on that. I think the main thing is that it really depends on your personal situation. So whether you want to, say, go into data science, that would be quite different than going into software development. For me, like Svetlana, I really wanted to get into developing in the browser, having a website that I had created. It's very visual. I think it's a really good place to start as well. HTML and CSS is, I guess, the easiest place to begin. And then from there, I guess my biggest piece of advice is just crack on with it. Find some free resources. Udemy is really good. They have lots of sales on. You can get really good courses for, say, £15. I know it's not free, but that is useful. And if you're really just starting out and don't know where to begin and want something for free, and check that actually it is the career you want to get into. Something like the Odin Project or Codecademy, Code Wars, things like that are really, really good places to begin. In terms specifically about language, for me, Ruby was definitely the right language to start off with because it's a very accessible language. It's been written so that it flows in the English language, and it uses, it's very plain English. You could understand it without really knowing any code because it's quite logical. But then again, if you wanted something a bit trickier, JavaScript, the only hard bit about it is the syntax. So once you get used to it, you will really enjoy it. So yes, pick one and get further along with it, because when you get to interview stage, like Victoria said, it doesn't really matter which language you're interviewing in. They just want to see how you tackle a problem, how you solve it. Or you don't even need to get to the end of these things. You need to show your thinking process.
Super interesting. Thank you so much. That's definitely given us a lot to think about, I imagine. So yeah, Ella, let's come back to you then. What advice would you give someone who is changing their career and going into tech like you did? Yeah, what would you give as a top tip maybe?
Well, firstly, I would say just go and do it. But in terms of advice, honestly, right now there are so many opportunities to enter tech, especially for women. And there are so many free resources and free courses. You don't need to pay for anything. So for example, I'm doing an apprenticeship. So this means that Funding Circle is paying for my training. They paid for me to do a bootcamp, and I'm also getting a free qualification out of it, whilst also being paid a salary to do it. So that's a great option for those that can't quit their job for 3 months to go and do a bootcamp themselves. And apprenticeships aren't the only option. There are loads of other free government funded courses. So I'd recommend going to look at those as well.
Awesome. And yeah, Sarah, Victoria, do you have anything else to add? I know, Sarah, you just gave quite a lot of advice there. If there's any other little pearls of wisdom, that would be great as well.
Yeah, I think the main thing in terms of advice, I guess, is to just keep building things. So if you've got an idea and you're not sure whether it's going to work, or there's something that you've been meaning to do, or you want to understand like how Airbnb works, then just try and build it, or find some YouTube videos as well to help you build something. But don't stop. Basically, the moment that you stop actually coding, that's where you're going to really lack motivation and potentially go backwards. Keep coding throughout your job search.
Really, really good point there for sure. To keep up the motivation. Victoria, any advice from yourself?
Yeah, as Ella said, do it. The longer you delay it, it doesn't mean that itching feeling will go away. I delayed it for 2 years. I'm here now, so I don't regret it, but that feeling never went away from me. I wanted to do it. It was scary, but yes, as Ella said, I can speak for myself and Sarah. We were a wave that, had to spend all of our savings on it. There was about £8,000 or something like that to join the course. Now the government is recognizing the fact that there's such a lack of professionals that are going into tech. There's so many governmental, so many options with governmental support, and not necessarily an apprenticeship that will, tie you down to one company, but these courses are now paid for. So that main stress of doing something that you don't know, will even work out, but also paying so much money for it, that kind of now is pushed away. And also there are part-time courses as well. There are courses that, yes, won't take you 9 weeks, it will take half a year, but you can still have your, main source of career, main source of income as well. So, there's so many options that are available now. And I think that at the moment, there's still not that many women in tech, and you can still ride a wave of, having that as a benefit for you, having that as an opportunity for you to join companies that lack diversity. So, yeah, I would definitely say it is really worth doing it if you're thinking about it. However, as Sarah also said, it is really important to also try and see if it works for you. And there are so many amazing benefits that come with engineering, but you know, it's not for everyone. So researching and doing some work beforehand just to understand if, you know, if you're enjoying it and if this journey will be worth for you is also another thing that is really worth thinking through before you start the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting that balance right. The way you all speak about your careers, it definitely sounds like, you know, this switch into tech was a real positive experience for you all. I'd love to hear maybe some specifics. Sarah, what makes your career as an engineer better than your previous career?
Sure. So I guess the biggest thing for me, coming from a teaching background, which is very prescriptive, you know, you need to go to lessons, there's hardly even time to eat in the day. I think software engineering is very flexible, and, you know, you can organize your time quite easily. Often there's actually flexible working hours as well, which is really nice. And then secondly, you're constantly learning, which is really what I was after in a career. So those two things.
Amazing. Victoria, Ella, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I would say in my previous career, I wasn't really surrounded maybe by people that were really passionate about constantly learning, which was quite demotivating and quite sad to kind of be surrounded by that atmosphere, you know, in the middle of your 20s. That definitely doesn't exist in engineering. I think that I was really lucky. Funding Circle was my first engineering experience, and I've never worked with so many smart but also so many humble people. They're so passionate about what they do. A lot of their journey started when they were, you know, 10 years old, and they started with gaming, and they had just a genuine deep interest in how things are created. So there's so much passion that goes into engineering in general, and also an opportunity to work in whatever industry you want to be working in. You can be working for fintech, you can be working for edtech, you can be working for Charlotte Tilbury. You know, the opportunities are completely endless. So you are never bored, not just because you are constantly learning, but also because you can work for, you know, for whatever industry you want to, and you can change your careers. And also obviously the return on your investment, or after the bootcamp as well, is very quick. The benefits of working in tech are fantastic, and progression is significantly quicker in tech than in majority of other careers. So you know, there are plenty of positives that come very quickly after you switch from whatever industry you've been working in before.
Fantastic. So do remember, everybody at home, to keep putting your questions into the chat. We've got a couple of minutes left, so it'd be great to answer some of your questions live. I'd love to kind of come back to Ella. Actually, you mentioned quite a few sort of resources or different kind of places that you looked for to kind of further your learning, your education. Like what would be the most helpful in terms of those resources that you know, helped you get your tech career?
Yeah, I think Sarah and Vic have mentioned some as well, but I really like project-based learning. So I'd recommend either Free Code Camp or the Odin project. They're both pretty similar. They'll take you from the basics right through to building a full stack web app. And yeah, when you're applying for jobs, it's like really necessary to have a project. Other than that, I'd recommend the Code First Girls introductory courses. They're 4 weeks long, they're free, and they introduce you to the basics. Plus they're taught as well, so you can ask as many questions as you want. And finally, just YouTube. Whenever I'm stuck on a problem, I just search the topic on YouTube, and 90% of the time, there's a video explaining the exact thing that I'm stuck on.
I love that. I think YouTube is such a great resource for all manner of different things. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sure you wouldn't be the first person to have faced a problem as well. So yeah, I think definitely there'll be resources out there for whatever issues you might have, which is actually interesting. Sarah, maybe what are your thoughts on kind of challenges that you faced in this transition, or any issues, any problems that you had in that switch to tech?
Sure. So actually it relates to Heather's question in the Q&A as well, of how do you stay motivated during the job search. I would say that finding your first job in tech is definitely the hardest part, which is frustrating because I know you're right at the beginning of your career. But what if you can have that sticking power to just get that first job, everything else will start falling into place. I mean, you're still going to have to work hard, don't get me wrong, but you will start to form that career path. So for me, the way that I did that, and people have different approaches to it, is I got planning. Essentially, I was like, how am I going to sustain myself during this period of applying for jobs? So I did supply teaching, and then I applied for jobs on the other days that I wasn't teaching. So I did about 2 or 3 days a week, and then applied for jobs the other 1 or 2 days. So then you turn applying for a job into a full-time job. And then also I had sort of contemporaries that did, I guess, the opposite of that. They gave themselves a time limit of 1 or 2 weeks, and they just applied to maybe 50, 100, 150 jobs, and really just did quantity over quality to get themselves in the door, essentially. And then they stayed there for, say, a year, and then decided whether actually they'd chosen the right job, and then move on if not. But often they would they'd get a position where it was the right fit. Because remember, when you're interviewing at a company, I think somebody was talking about this near the beginning of the panel, you're also interviewing them. Don't forget about that. And I mean, now I do interviews with Funding Circle, and I think that is a really big takeaway for you all watching this, as you know, you can say no to a company as well if you don't think that it will be the right fit for you.
Absolutely. I think that point is really important. You've definitely got to think about, yes, that first hurdle is getting that first role, but also be picky and really think about what environment you want to be in. Victoria, maybe one for you. What sort of skills or experience from your previous career did you find were the most useful in transitioning to your tech role?
I guess resilience and perseverance had two very kind of needed factors. Sarah mentioned it as well, and I do quite a bit of mentoring now. People reach out on LinkedIn, people that have just finished a boot camp or searching for a job and are interested in Funding Circle job. And every single time I do say to them, to me personally, find the interviewing process was the hardest part of the journey. The boot camp wasn't that. And you know, once you have your foot through the door, you've gotten your first job, it's a smooth sailing after. But you know, the process of finding a job is really hard. There's so many pressures, and you know, let's not deny that financial pressures are, you know, non-existent. If you're searching for a job for more than 2 months, you know, it is only logical to kind of start having a bit of a, you know, an anxiety and panic. But I had that as well. And I mentioned that I've spent quite a lot of my savings doing a bootcamp. But the thing that I really stuck with is I didn't apply for jobs that I didn't have a genuine interest in, because I knew that the reason why I did the whole course was because I wanted to be a part of the company, a part of the industry that I am keen on, that I have a genuine interest in. Whenever there were companies that would not even have a chat with me, but send me a take-at-home test, I already kind of knew that, okay, well, this is a defining moment. They don't care about my personality, anything that I will be bringing to the table. The only thing that they care about is me spending time, you know, doing a coding challenge for a week. So, you know, it is a hard journey, but if you believe and persist, and you know, there were some times when I was interviewing and for companies that my course mates were interviewing for as well. But the thing that I really try to do is push myself to the, you know, to the limits, because a lot of the times that is your one and only way of showing how good you are, that one interview. And you know, it is really important, I think, to maybe sometimes concentrate on one thing at the time than doing quantity over quality. That's my subjective opinion. But yeah, I would say just being being very mindful of what you need from this, just as much as the other company needs from you as well, and like believing in yourself and believing in the fact that you will find a job. I've applied for a job with Funding Circle and it was a career comeback. I was not a career comeback, you know, and whoever saw my CV, you know, reached out to me and just said, that's not a correct position you're applying for, but we are searching for associates. So, you know, if you find a company that you like, send them an email, even if they're not searching for someone. Just be persistent, but also believe in, you know, stay true to your beliefs, and, you know, stay true to what you need and why you started the journey. Sometimes that's really important, because I think genuine passion and chemistry does come across as a, you know, a massive point during a lot of interviews that you're doing. You can sense it when people are genuinely passionate about the subject, rather than when they're just searching for a job. And that sometimes differentiates you from, you know, 100 other applicants. But yeah, just being persistent is very important, I think, in this industry, especially during the interviewing process. The reason why I'm pushing on interviewing, it seems like a lot of people are questioning it, and, you know, how to stay motivated. And yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the main traits that I try to keep. And yeah.
Awesome. That was a really, really insightful answer. I think what you touched on there about the kind of human side, you know, the passion, the curiosity, all of these things. We have a question about the future maybe of programming, of engineering itself. And it sounds like, you know, the robots, the AI, the ChatGPT, like it won't take over just yet. It won't get you know, in the way of the human side of things. So I think that's really interesting to end on. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much for everybody that added a question, for everybody that's kind of followed along wherever you are. I'd just like to point out, obviously, there were quite a few questions about Funding Circle's hiring and open positions and things like that. Obviously, Funding Circle are actively hiring right now, and as a follow-up, we will send you all the link for their career page, where you'll find out the whole list of open positions, as well as, you know, what life is like at Funding Circle. If you haven't got a much of an idea already from this, you can also see all of the benefits and the good side of things as well. So yeah, if you're interested in career opportunities, please register via the form that we will send you in the email, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So thank you everybody for attending. It was lovely to speak with you all, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you all again very soon. Take care.